live on YouTube. We're on Hangout on air. And
world.
You're chatting here with Laurie from House of Running, and you'll have a few of people from our audience. Ooh, hold on a second. There's a little echo. I fixed that. Is that better? There was
I
a
heard
little
nothing.
bit of.
I'm fine.
Oh, great. There was a little bit of a delay. Okay, so the audience that'll be listening in are the people from our House of Running community, and we've invited you to just quickly chat with us a little bit about sports injuries because, well, you're sport injury Matt. And you're going to be joining us in January for a couple of workshops, January 21st and 22nd, I believe, to do some running workshops for us. And anyways, so welcome Sport Injury Matt. Matt is a sports therapist and a running analyst, and he works over in the UK for Stride UK and Studio 57, and he also runs his own website. It's called sportinjurymatt.co.uk.
Yeah, co.uk.
Yes. There we go. Matt, you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you?
Okay, so yeah, thanks, Laurie. Thanks very much for inviting me along. You've basically summed up most of my life at the moment. I work with not just runners; they're predominantly runners, but I see a lot of other people from both sports background and just everyday occupational injuries and pain. And yeah, so we here in the clinic we see especially this running season now, around 100 runners more or less a week coming in and going out. It's not all injuries. Often it's people who are trying to reduce the risk of injury as much as possible and do things to try to improve performance. So we love to try and get people before they're injured. That's something we do always try and do rather than just wait until they're here and then try and fix them. So yeah, that's what I do. Running myself when I can fit it in. Obviously, ironically, the busier we get here as it gets to run season, there's less time for us to actually go out and do running. But I try to listen to my own medicine and make some time. I've got a 18-month-old child, so sometimes that's slightly hindered. But I do go out and run with him 3 times a week or so. And then I get a long run in for myself. So.
Yeah, and what would you say is your favorite distance these days?
My background is in half marathon. I always jokingly said the only marathon I would do would be Brighton Marathon, my hometown, thinking that we'd never get permission. And one year suddenly we did get permission. So that's when my marathon distance started, and I had to basically eat my own words and do that distance. I get a massive kick out of the atmosphere and helping people through it. I think it's a wonderful challenge, but personally myself, I like those 13.1 miles where you can for me personally, after 3 hours my mind starts wandering and I'm like, I've got other things to do now, but I love putting people through a marathon, so it will always be that massive kind of challenge, which is great to be part of.
Yeah, and you also coach and work with a large group of long distance runners over there in the UK. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, marathon is still the distance which people want to achieve, whether rightfully or wrongfully. So yeah, we have seasons where we'll take people out for summer training or winter training, working them up from, in some cases, people who haven't run for more than half an hour all the way to those, 26.2.
Great. We do that too over here. And we have a lot of runners that are lately interested in trails in addition to these long distances. Do you have some runners over there that are doing that as well?
Oh, definitely. I mean, where we are situated, we've got the best of both worlds. So we're right on the seafront. We've got a beautiful long promenade, it's always full of runners. There's more runners than pedestrians down there, which is great. And then we're also next to a big piece of land called the Downs, which stretches for miles and miles. So it's really useful for us because generally we kind of recommend for a lot of runners try and get a mixture for reasons we may well talk about later on, just to expose the body to different forces. But then also there's some people who science hasn't quite worked out yet. Their bodies are better designed to run off road, and there's other people who are better to run on road. So a lot of the time what we do here is just remind people that we're all individuals, even though we all love running, and it's about finding what your body likes. and cracking on with that rather than trying to do what you've read in a book or someone else does. And that forms a lot of the kind of help that we give people.
Yeah, sounds like sound advice. And earlier you had mentioned that you really like to get runners in before they're injured. So what are some of the tips and the advice that you would give to a runner on what they can do to reduce injury or to not get injured, hopefully?
So I think there's often the wonderful thing about running is there's a lot more people over here. You probably have a similar thing, like it's Couch to 5K. It's quite but it's building up a lot of fame over here because it does help to get people off the couch, which is fantastic. It's obviously the biggest obstacle a lot of people have. But what we try and do is get involved with them and get them to see us before they start running into problems. A lot of people think that obviously as kids we ran and you just get up and run, but running a certain distance, depending on your body and your history, is a skill. It's like any other sport or like trying to learn a musical instrument, and running's no exception if you want to add that time and frequency on. So we do a lot of presentations, and we've worked with the NHS over here to try and remind people when they're going to Couch to 5K that it's not just a case of getting out the door and running. There's a certain level of fitness you're going to need to be able to do that. There's a lot of ancillary exercise which can help you. And also then there's, once upon a time, a coach used to be something that was only associated with elite runners or, serious runners. But we work with coaches and try to get people, you're learning a skill. Get along to a club, have a chat to a coach, let them see how you're running. There's no one perfect way of running, but there's certain traits we know amongst the most successful running styles which will help you out, which could potentially reduce injury and help your performance. So from day one, if you've got the confidence now to get out the door and run, that's fantastic, but go and get some help, get some support from a running coach now rather than wait until later and you've picked up maybe potentially bad habits or myths and misconceptions that surround us every day.
And we have a lot of these. I've worked with a lot of runners who have actually tried Couch to 5K or Couch to 10K. And do you find that these programs progress a little bit quickly typically for most runners?
I think the problem is with any system or method or approach is everyone needs to realize that you can't have a one-size-fits-all nature. So like the Couch to 5K here has an app, and there's like an earphone where you have a little voice telling you what to do. Now speed up, now slow down, which is great, and it gives a lot of people motivation. But above all of that, you have to know that if your body's complaining or your body's not, if your body's not suited for what you're being told to do, you've got to have the confidence to actually stop or slow down. And sometimes the other way, some people are able to do more than maybe it's on the program. So it's knowing that just the same as a training plan, it's not written in stone, it's written in pencil, and you've got to have the confidence to adjust it where need be.
Mm-hmm. The confidence, or sometimes maybe a little bit more knowledge about how it needs to be adjusted for your own abilities.
Yeah, definitely. But a lot of the time, even with the beginners, the secret, I think, a lot of the secret of learning to reduce injury risk with running is just learning to listen to your body. And that's not just a psychological thing. It's experiencing pain, understanding the difference between pain and effort. It's being able to measure it and just get that experience of time on feet. So you know when something feels a bit weird. So you know when you wake up the next morning, whether it's just delayed onset of muscle soreness or whether your body's trying to give you another message. And then at the same time, appreciating that things need to be planned. You can't. I always say to runners that running sets itself apart from all other sports because we kind of think we can do it 365 days a year. Because in theory we can. We don't need to rent a court, or we don't need to wait for a season or join a particular club that's only open. In theory, you can go out and do your running streak, but all other sports have obviously a competitive season and then a recovery part and then a build-up season and even some, but runners don't seem to do that. A lot of the time they'll just get into running and then bam, park run every Saturday. Do you have park run over there?
We don't. We don't, but I've had a lot of people ask me about it and say, why don't you start that over here?
No one knows what I'm talking about, but over here we have every Saturday. It's a free 5K timed for people, and the idea is just to make running open to everybody, and it's very fun and that. But yeah, runners suddenly find themselves signing up for X amount of half marathons, 10Ks, and although they're good at planning their weeks, Monday to Sunday, I'll do a hill sprints here and a tempo here and maybe a long run. suddenly they're doing the same week 52 weeks a year, and that's where research comes and shows no, inappropriate loading is the number one cause, or for, well, I think for 80% of running injuries there's normally some inappropriate training has been going on. So yeah.
Yeah, we do our training in training seasons. So we have 2 training seasons, and then we have a month break in between where we recommend that people take some time off and maybe even try some different sports or swim instead of run. I do see a lot of people having a very hard time stopping or taking a break from running or doing less. I imagine you see that too.
That's the great thing about joining a like a club or a running group like House of Running or something. One, there's the social element, which is fantastic, and most of us are social creatures. Not everybody, some people just always want to run by themselves. But again, from a very early time, once you've got the confidence, join a club, because you get information which otherwise you won't have access to from people like yourself. And the problem is, a lot of the time, the information you get if you're not part of a club or a group is going to be Google or Facebook, and you're just going to start seeing people talking about their running streaks, and you're going to get a lot of confusion and unfortunately, a lot of myths and misconceptions, So we definitely try and work close to running coaches and clubs, so the information they're giving out kind of tallies up with ours. And then we tell runners, look, go and join a group. These days it's not elite anymore. Even down here, there's a lot of, we don't even call them running clubs anymore, because a club has connotations of competitiveness, and it's a group, it's a social group, it's something to enjoy, improve, and get education. So
Yeah. Well, you had said earlier about listening to your body as one of the things that you think is most helpful in preventing injuries, reducing injuries. Is there another one that you would add to that?
I think also it's a case of planning. So not just looking at your week, like I mentioned before, it's looking at what you're doing in a month and during a year. So that's another very good way of monitoring your load, because ultimately injury is because 9 times out of 10 you've overdone it, you've overloaded the tissue. So keeping an eye on what your year looks like as well as your week is a big one we do. And as the research shows, it's just education. It's learning that things which traditionally we associate as causes of running injury, I say we as the recreational runner, they're not at the bottom of the pyramid, they're at the top. So things like footwear is a big one. As soon as people start getting aches and pains, they think, oh, I'm wearing the wrong shoes. Unfortunately, I don't know what it's like in the Netherlands, but over here, there's still quite a few running shops who are using an outdated model of overpronation and oversupination, and they're selling it as if it's science. It's changing. A lot of shops are getting rid of that model, but still the chances are, if you're a runner and you go to a shoe shop, they're going to say, oh, the reason you're hurting is because you're an overpronator. And we've known for a long time now that that's not based on any science, and if anything, it could cause problems as well as maybe coincidentally improving them. So yeah, getting rid of footwear myths, getting rid of a lot of myths to do with what to do if you do start hurting, what sort of treatment to get. There's still a lot of no pain, no gain therapy going on, where you'll go along with a pain and the therapist rubs you really hard and creates even more pain. So thanks to kind of modern science, we know a lot more about pain. It's still very complex, but we know that you can't fight pain with pain. So things like foam rolling, the number of times I get people coming in here who have been combating a pain by torturing themselves on a foam roller, rubbing the hell out of their IT band, and it's only when they sit down that I say to them, so just to check, this really hurt while you were doing it? Oh yeah, it really hurt. And you think this is going to make things better? Well, yeah, because I'm breaking up the knots underneath. And I'm like, no, you're not. Your body is way too tough and robust, believe me, for you to break up tissue by putting weight on it. Just the same as a therapist hasn't got the strength to break up tissue or change it. It doesn't work like that. So education is a big one. It can really help. And I think that's the reason why there's still so many injuries in running since the 1980s. It hasn't come down at all, if not, there's even more people getting injured. Because with the internet, with all the access we've got now to information, it means we've got access to a lot of misinformation. So yeah, still the biggest strategy for us therapists is education more than anything.
All right, that's interesting. Yeah, and we also we see that a lot too over here. And it's so much easier as a runner to think that I can just change my shoes and keep running or doing what I'm doing, and changing my shoes will make it all better.
Definitely, we as human beings, we naturally opt for the easiest, lowest path of resistance. So if we can go to a therapist and lie down for half an hour and have them make us feel better with a massage, then great. I'm not saying that won't help, but it's massage is never going to make you stronger. It's not going to increase your thresholds when you try and do that run again. Just the same as you can get injured in any shoe. It's the same as a lot of stretching's a big one that I go on about on my course, and I bore some people to death. But if I always kind of said for years that if runners put as much effort into strength training as they do into stretching, then we'd have a lot less injured runners. But we like stretching. It feels good to stretch. We stretch, animals stretch, cats stretch, but cats don't stretch to avoid injury. They just stretch because it feels nice. So there's a lot of misinformation about if something hurts, then it's because it's tight. And if it's tight, then I need to stretch it. The problem is, and it's something I use here a lot, just because something hurts doesn't mean it's tight. We use that word always, but actually what we're really saying is it's sore. And why is it sore? Because it's tired. It's unable to do what you asked it to do. So what do I need to do? Well, I need to strengthen it, calm it down and strengthen it. Stretching doesn't come into it half as much as people would have you believe. Or
strengthen it so that it doesn't get tired as quickly.
Exactly. So it boils down to, can your tissues handle what you want them to do? Mm-hmm. And if they can't, then you've got to build them up.
We promote strength training over here. We actually have a class that we do strength training for runners every Thursday. Brilliant. And we definitely believe in strength training to reduce injury and improve performance and just be a better overall well-rounded runner. How often do you recommend doing strength training in a week for somebody who's, say, running somewhere between 2 and 4 days a week?
Again, it will depend very much on the runner, and you'll hear me say that until you're blue in the face. But and also, not every runner needs it. It's not the magical cure. Research, out of all the things which do reduce injury, strength training seems to be at the moment at the top. There's various studies which we talk about on the course which show that strength training can reduce up to 50% of overuse injuries, and most running injuries are overuse injuries. So there's a big plus for strength training. Most runners, if they come to me with some sort of issue, then I try and start them off with, depending on the nature of the issue, but I try and propose maybe 2 half-hour sessions a week. Obviously, it's got to fit into their lifestyle. I want to make sure I'm not stressing them out too much. A lot of the time, people will think when you say strength training, then suddenly they need to go to the gym 3 times a week for an hour and a half. It's not. It's like maybe 25 minutes twice a week with some specific exercises and a way of executing them that suits them. And that, in our experience, anecdotally and also research, it's supported. It's good. It brings down, it raises your tolerance and brings down the risk of injury.
Mm-hmm. And what about those runners who are looking for a little bit more performance? They're interested in injury reduction, but also performance.
Performance is always a tricky one because it's both in studies and looking at it clinically, because it's so difficult to rule out other factors. But that said, I think one of the things, again, in terms of education is teaching runners that it links in with the stretching thing. I use the analogy of a spring. So do you have slinkies over there? Do you have slinkies?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, the slinky with the step. Yeah. So if you want to be a great runner, then your springs, they don't want to be like slinkies. You're not looking for this massive, mobile, flexible spring. You're looking for a spring like that you'd find in a car, which is tight, which is like difficult to push. But when you do push it down a little bit, the recoil is huge. And that's the analogy we use with runners. If runners realize that actually running depends on a certain level of stiffness in the muscles and the tendons, it sounds like a dirty word, but you want me to get less flexible. But then we use kind of in the presentations I do, I use our probably most famous runner, Paula Radcliffe, as an example. She's still got the female world record for marathon distance, and in her training for that 2:13:24, whatever it is, she actually lost flexibility in her sit and reach test. She became less flexible. And at that point, normally in the presentations, there's like a sharp intake of breath. And they go, oh, surely not. She became less flexible and a better runner. But research shows that elite runners actually have less flexibility. Flexibility isn't a skill. Okay, if you're going to be a better runner and you're going to have more elastic recoil in the muscles, then you're probably going to lose a certain amount of flexibility because your springs are getting stronger and more responsive. And that's, again, potentially where weight training helps. It improves the stiffness in the body.
So I'm guessing you would recommend strength training over yoga for a runner.
Well, it's an interesting one with yoga, and I was chatting to a yoga teacher who we work with today, because in my view, I like to work with yogas who very much stress the fact that yoga isn't about just trying to increase flexibility. Flexibility is not, if I had a t-shirt at the moment, it would say flexibility is not a skill. Okay, unless you plan to kick people in the head because you're a martial artist or you're a ballet dancer or something where you do need extreme ranges of motion, running doesn't take that much range. Okay, you don't need much more range to run than you do to walk. Okay, so the idea that we need to improve our range to run is not based on anything. Yoga is more about actually mobility, so it's more about control. It doesn't matter where you're getting to, it's the control you have during that particular movement. And that's what I was checking with the yoga today, because she was very much, yeah, that's exactly what it's about. You're not trying to get further and further each time, you're trying to have more control. So any form of flow yoga where you are moving from one posture to another nice and slowly and just getting everything, the coordination and the timing, that's for me still a form of strength training, because strength is limited by mobility and neuromuscular control. So it depends on the definition of yoga and what the teacher's what their goal is for you.
Yes, there are definitely a lot of different practices out there.
Yeah, which is again part of the problem. But yoga can be great as well for balance and coordination, which again, and proprioception, which is another big one for runners coming back from injury. So all of these poses on a single leg whilst moving the upper body are great. I think they're great for runners.
Definitely, and great for core stability as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's see. I have a few more questions for you. Let's see. Here we go. What significant changes have you seen in the running world over the last 5 or 10 years? And what does that mean for us runners today?
In terms of changes for what runners are seeing?
Well, changes as in how the running world has changed. Because 5 or 10 years ago, it was, I think, quite different. I've been running for 15 years, and it doesn't quite look the same.
You look far too young to be running for 15 years. It's not bad, was it? I was in there quite quick. So I think one of the major ones probably is footwear. It hasn't gone as far as the craze of the Born to Run and the minimalistic footwear with I can't remember when the book was. I think it was 2013, maybe, Born to Run. You know the book, yeah?
Yes. Definitely.
Yeah. So obviously that sparked off everyone trying to run like Indians in Mexico on the sand, and it was a good day for sports therapists in terms of injury, because a lot of people realized that you can't suddenly go from a built-up shoe to barefoot or feet with 5 kind of finger toes. It doesn't work that way. And also we realized that it's not a case of the shoe you're wearing reducing injury risks. It's about finding a shoe that suits you. The advantage of that was it casted some doubt on the traditional version of shoes, as in, do we all need a very structured shoe? Do we all need this idea of, if our arches drop down to a certain level, we need to try and start propping it up? And the whole overpronation myth started becoming a little bit more dissolved thanks to the minimalistic trends. And now today runners have got a much larger range of shoes to choose from, and they feel less that shoes are the be and end all. We're moving that way anyway. And again, it's supported by research, because one thing we do know about shoes, and it's not a great model for shops to use, but the most accurate link between shoes and running injury is comfort. I'd like to see the shop that actually has someone walk in and tell them, I'm going to find the best pair of shoes for you. Are they comfortable? Fantastic. Thank you very much. It wouldn't be kind of regarded as very good service, but that's the best we've got at the moment. And so we also know that rotating shoes can help certain runners as well. Quite a lot of runners, so not wearing the same shoe every time you go out, experimenting with a bit more of a racing flat if you're doing shorter distances, maybe even experimenting with a tiny bit of barefoot running. Whilst you're exposing the body to different loads, which is basically what you're doing with different shoes, you're going to be increasing your variability to handle, especially if you're running off-road, and get stronger. Probably footwear has made the biggest difference between now and 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely recommend rotating shoes as you do. That's a good one. I've also, when I started running, we didn't have watches. We didn't have running watches. And I found that it was just what we did. Listening to our body was so much easier when we didn't have all of this extra gear.
Yeah, and interesting one. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, well, we've become much more dependent on it, and I just find that when I first started, I really had a very good grasp of how to listen to my body, and it's a skill that I find that's harder and harder when we depend more and more on all these external things to tell us how we're doing when we're running.
No, that's good. You're making me challenge my own kind of biases, which is nice. I must admit, I do, because we do a lot of presentations here for people relatively new to distance running, so training for half or full. A lot of the time when it comes to race preparation, a lot of beginners don't have a race target time. When I say, what are you going to do this in? And they're like, I don't care, I just want to finish. And for me, my bias leans a little bit towards if you don't know what time you're going to do the race in, if you haven't calculated in a target time, then you haven't got a target pace, which means how you're going to manage your training, how you're going to progress, how you're going to check whether you're doing too much or too little. So I'm to get across the line, to get off the couch, yeah, forget about Garmin's, forget about all of that, just listen to your body. But when it comes to race preparation, then I'm quite into people using the Garmin, or just seeing what pace they're doing. Because again, for distance running, one of the biggest issues we have is people just running too fast. They'll set off for their marathon training running the same speed as if they were doing a 5K park run or something. And often you just can't listen to your body. We all know what it's like to start on a race day at a half or a full marathon, and you pull away from the start line thinking you're running at your marathon pace, and then you have a look at your watch and you're running even faster than your 5K pace. But the feedback from your body is because you feel so good and invigorated and happy, and then it comes to mile 20 where you think you're running your marathon pace and you look at your watch and you realize you're running 2 minutes slower. So I understand perfectly what you say, and I encourage runners to now and again just go and have a long run without any watch on at all, out of season if you're not preparing for a particular race. Listen to the body. It's so true what you say. But when it comes to race preparation, yeah, use that data. Of all the apps and stuff that are out there, and I think there's a little bit too much out there now, too much kind of feedback for runners. I still think pace and potentially cadence as well, if you're coming back from injury or maybe trying to improve performance, is a good feedback as well.
Yes, well, we use watches in our training, but I usually try to say don't become a slave to your watch and give yourself a break from time to time to allow yourself to really understand how to listen to your body and not depend on.
Yeah, I'm going to start telling more runners the same thing now I've heard you say it. It makes a lot of sense. I'm making notes. I'm writing notes. Remember I'm going to do a listen to Laurie corner on my website. Yeah.
Well, it's been great talking to you. I'm sure you have a lot more to share in the workshops that are coming up in January. Do you have a few more things you'd like to share about these workshops that you'll have?
No, apart from just come along. It's going to be great. It's great interaction. Just the same as I've learned from you today. I've made some notes here. I learn from every single attendee at my workshops, because the one important thing about us as therapists is listening to our clients or patients or runners, and then that helps us develop and evolve by learning about different experiences. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to coming there on the 21st, 22nd, is it?
Yes.
and having a run. What's the name of the park? Is it Hondel something or
Vondel Park.
Vondel Park? I've been looking at that on Google, and it looks beautiful. So I'm looking forward to having a run around there, and looking forward most of all to meeting your runners. I've been following the Instagram House of Running, and it looks like you will have a great time. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
inspirational.
it's lots of fun. So great. Well, thanks for taking your time to share your thoughts with us about injury prevention and performance. Or actually, I should say injury reduction, because I remember you pointing that out, that was an important one.
Yeah, it's a little bit semantics, but I like getting away from injury prevention, because as runners trying to improve ourselves, we're going to get injured. There's no way you can prevent injury because we're not really totally sure what causes it. But there's definitely, things you can do to reduce the risk of injury.
Great. Well, I hope that our runners will come out and meet you in January, and we will see you soon. Thanks for joining me.
No problem.
Bye, everybody.